Well, that was weird. Okay, I think we're live. Let's see, I got audio, I got video, I got people online. Where are you from? Everybody chime in with where you're watching from if you haven't already. How's it going, everybody? Merry Christmas and everything like that. We had a great Christmas here with much of our family and really enjoyed spending some time with the grandkids and that sort of thing. Okay, everybody sees me. Good. Well, I missed you. I missed having our daily chat here, and so let's have a little talk about what we are seeing, what's going on in the war in Israel and elsewhere. First, a couple things I wanted to just mention. Uh, First, some notes on Wendy and our girls down in Cartagena, because many of you donated to help those girls, and so I wanted you to know what's going on. Uh, if you don't know, we have been helping these Venezuelan migrants in Colombia, Cartagena, for about 3 years now. These women uh, wanted to needed to leave their country because they were eating their pets at that point uh, in Venezuela. So they left and went to Colombia, and they wanted to go to the United States, but I talked them out of it. And then uh, we want they didn't want to work as prostitutes. Many of the women that come out of Venezuela don't have anything else to sell and end up just selling their bodies. So wanted to save them from that fate, and they all had a bunch of kids. Long story short, we've been helping them with housing for about 3 years, but they still had to make money to eat. And so they were going downtown to where all the tourists are at night and essentially begging. They were selling candy, but you buy a bag of candy and you sell it by the piece. A lot of times people just feel sorry for you and just give you money. And that's how they would make enough money to eat. And obviously that's not a good program. So we were trying to help them get out of that program by getting them like micro businesses set up. So we made a trip to Cartagena, my wife and I and a bunch of people, a bunch of my viewers. We went down there about 3 or 4 months ago, 4 months ago, I guess, and got them set up with these little micro businesses. But before they could get fully rolling with those, the mothers actually got arrested because the police had apparently been watching them coming downtown late at night, bringing their kids because they didn't have any childcare, and selling candies. And the police arrested them because, perversely enough, it's legal to work as a prostitute, but it's not legal to beg. And so, thank you for that. I say MM. Couldn't read it. Um, yeah, it's legal to work as a prostitute, but not legal to beg, and so and it's not legal to have your kids down there at night. But they didn't have much choice, and so before they could really get rolling with their businesses, we helped them with. They got arrested. The mothers were put in jail. They got charged with trafficking, child trafficking of all things. They're not trafficking their kids, but of course, there may be some things we don't understand about this whole process yet. Uh, Suffice it to say, their kids were thrown out on the streets where they are now at terrible risk of actually being trafficked, and the mothers were put in jail. So we've been supporting the kids, giving them food and helping them find a place to stay. Supporting the lady who was taking care of those kids. It's a pastor lady that we had met. And actually, the mothers in prison have to buy their own food or they don't get fed. And of course, they don't have any money. And so they were not getting any food. So we were sending money for their food as well. And we paid also some money for a lawyer to try to help work out this mess. you all donated to help with that, and it was very, very helpful. It was very expensive for all of those things. On top of all that, the oldest of the kids, 18-year-old girl, was pregnant and in the hospital with some complications, and so I spent about $1,000 on hospital bills for her as well. So greatly appreciate all of your help in helping those girls. And it sounds like the lawyer has been able to, he thinks he's going to be able to get the moms out um, like day after tomorrow, get out of jail. I don't know if that's a temporary thing or a permanent thing, but praise God for that. And we did get a place for the kids to live in the meantime, and the moms will be able to stay there too when they get out, and hopefully they can just get going with their new businesses and not have to go back to jail at all. IDR, thank you very much for that 159 million, whatever that is. Idrus. So anyway, thank you all for helping. Connie and I are planning another quick trip to Cartagena on the 8th of January to just sort of try to get a handle on what's going on with all these women and try to, get them back on track. We want to get them out of that, and we want to keep them from having to come to the United States feeling like they do. They don't need to come to the United States. They can make a living in Colombia. But it's tempting because their whole neighborhood is clearing out and going to the United States, and everybody else is doing it, and so why shouldn't they? So we've been trying to help them as best we can. I cannot turn up the volume a whole lot more than I've already done. You're going to have to, well, let me see. Maybe I might have lied to you there. Let me see if I can help with the volume. Okay, so we're going to turn up the input. How's that? Is that better? Maybe that helped. Okay. Maybe that'll help. Okay. No, that might be a little too loud even. Okay. So, we are going to go down there. We're going to try to figure things out. We're also going to visit the prison, whether or not the mothers are still there, because as it turns out, there may be a real opportunity for ministry there. You've got all these women packed into the women's prison there. Very little in the way of care. They don't have any feminine products. They don't have anything, even mattresses or blankets or pillows or furniture or anything in there. So we're going to go visit that, and we'll bring you a report once we get there. Also wanted to announce that the last video I put up about Hatun Tash, the evangelist, the former Muslim lady in the UK who disappeared after our last interview with her. She has sent a message saying that she is okay. Sounds like she's in hiding. We don't know all the details, but hopefully we'll hear more from her. But it sounds like she's alive anyway, so that's good. So I wanted to announce that because I know a lot of people are praying for her. So let's talk about what's going on in northern Israel. The Hezbollah fighters up there have been pretty much getting their heads handed to them by the IDF. They keep firing rockets across into Israel. Just today, just an hour ago, they fired 11 rockets at the town of Kiryat Shimona up in the northern panhandle. And 4 of those rockets made impact on the city. The rest were shot down. And so there was some damage, no injuries that I know of. But, it's such a nuisance. It's more than a nuisance up there. It's a deadly threat to the people who live in those areas. And so they've all been evacuated. They can't go back to their homes. They can't go back to their work. They can't go back to their schools. And they're stuck in hotels all around Israel. And they want to go home. Now, the IDF has been preparing, as I've been talking about over the last week or so, they've been preparing to invade Lebanon. to actually go into Lebanon with force to push Hezbollah back behind the Litani River, which is 10 or 15 miles away from the border where they are supposed to stay. Hezbollah agreed under the last ceasefire that they had that they would not come south of the Litani River, but they immediately did and have set up pretty massive fortifications and things like that right along the border with Israel. I just put up a video on my locals page that you can go see that shows the IDF striking some Hezbollah infrastructure that is right. You can see the border fence and you can see the stuff blowing up right behind it. If I show it here, they'll demonetize the video, but you can go watch that. Just go to chuckholton.locals.com or just go to chuckholton.com and you can watch that video. But without a doubt, Hezbollah has a serious presence south of the Litani River. Now, there's another group that occupies that area south of the Litani River, and that's a UN peacekeeping force called UNFIL. UNFIL stands for the UN Force in Lebanon. And these are some of the most worthless UN agents out of all of the worthless UN agencies out there. They have done virtually nothing to keep the peace since their inception in the 1960s. They actually, in some ways, kind of facilitate what Hezbollah is doing because they set up bases right along the border, and then Hezbollah comes and fires at the Israelis from right next to those bases, so that the Israelis, if they fire back, risk hitting the UN peacekeeping force. And so that doesn't work. The other thing we found out just recently is that the UNFIL guys actually have to get permission from Hezbollah to go anywhere south of the Litani River. And so Hezbollah will clear certain routes. Okay, you can drive on this road and this road, but not on any of these other roads going down there. And the reason they do that is because they don't want UNFIL to see the works that they're doing to fortify, the fighting positions and stuff like that they're putting in along the border with Israel. And so they're like, UNFIL agrees to only drive on these certain roads where they won't see anything. And they can say, yeah, looks like things are pretty peaceful down here. We're doing a good job. There was an incident recently where some of those UNFIL soldiers actually took a wrong turn and went to an area where they weren't cleared to be, and they were surrounded by a mob and attacked, and one of the UNFIL soldiers was killed. This is an Irish soldier that was down there. So the UNFIL is not doing anything to help. They're except wasting money. They're wasting lots of taxpayer money for sure, and they have been for a long time, wasting a ton of money. So that's exciting. Now, what we saw yesterday, par for the course, Hezbollah fired an anti-tank guided missile into Israel. They've been doing that a lot. They've got a lot of these ATGMs. This time they fired it at an ancient church in a place called Acrit. And I don't know if I'm for question any word on Hatun. Okay, you missed it. Hatun has made contact and says that she is okay, but she's in hiding, and we may learn more about her today. That's all I know. So I lost my train of thought. Okay, so they fired an ATGM at an ancient church in a place called Acrit. Now, Acrit has an interesting history. The village of Acrit was a Palestinian Christian village back in the 1940s. That village was emptied out when the Israelis took over the area. the Christians that lived there were pushed into Lebanon, which is less than a mile away. Well, about a mile. They weren't able to come back. They were fighting to be able to come back to their village. And they finally got the Israeli Supreme Court to rule that, yes, they could come home and they could rebuild their village. But the IDF has never yet allowed that to happen. There's some concerns, I guess, they have about that. And there's been a bunch of heartache on both sides about that over the years, talking in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. They've been, fighting to try to come back to their village. The only structure that's still standing in that village, for the most part, is the church itself. Now, it's actually a Greek Orthodox church, and the Christians come back to that church and have services there. They had Christmas service there this year, and so they, they've been fighting to try to come back to their village. We drove right by that village when we were up there to visit the Maronite Christians shortly before we left Israel a week or so ago. A couple weeks ago, I guess that was. And while we were up there, we interviewed a Maronite Christian major in the IDF who is there trying to help the Maronite Christians that live in those areas. It's really interesting patchwork of villages along the border up there in the north, because you have Druze villages, and Druze are a Muslim kind of religion. They don't call themselves Arabs. Maronites are Christians that don't call themselves Arabs. They call themselves Maronites. They are, again, they speak Aramaic. The Maronites do, the language Jesus spoke. There are Jewish villages. There are Arab villages. There are, just all a whole patchwork. So every time you see a village off in the distance, it's hard to know exactly who lives in that village. There were some hints that we were given while we were there on how you can know who is in what village, just by the type of construction that they use, whether or not there's a lot of trees and things like that. But without a doubt, the further north you go, the more there's a mix of Christian, Arab, Jewish, whatever, all kind of mixed together up there. So if you thought that Israel was just a Jewish country, it's not. It's very, very cosmopolitan in that way, and has all these ancient cultures that live in it, and it's pretty fascinating up there. The Christians are a very small minority. They represent less than 2% of the total people in Israel, but there's more of them up in the north. And these Maronite Christians specifically are, they speak Arabic in their day-to-day life, but in the home, and they teach their kids at school and stuff Aramaic, and try to keep that language alive. So there's also these Greek Orthodox Christians up there that have their own culture that's even separate. It's kind of evolved separately from the Greeks themselves. And this particular village of Acrit was a Greek Orthodox village, and it had about 400 or 500 people living in it. And then, it's empty now. But this church, they have kept the church up, and they even kind of camp out there. They've been fighting to try to get allowed to come back and live there. Every time they try to go back and do that, the Israeli government doesn't allow them. Yeah, we got told about that. There's some Maronite villages up there that are like that as well. It's really, I think it has more to do with security than anything else. They're so close to the border with Lebanon that the IDF feels like it would be a real drain on their resources to try to protect those villages, and they're very exposed to enemy fire up there. So that's my guess of one of the big reasons why the Israelis don't want them to go back and populate that village. But anyway, the church yesterday was shot with an anti-tank guided missile. There was an 80-year-old man staying at the church, guarding the church, who was injured in that initial attack. Now, this is what we call a double tap. Here's what happened. When the IDF sent emergency services in to rescue that old man and, occupy that hill, the Hezbollah operatives were waiting for them to show up. And when the rescue services showed up, they fired again at another missile at the same site, and it injured 9 IDF soldiers. So a total of 10 people injured, one of them seriously injured, and some damage not to the church itself, but to an adjacent building, a shed or something that was to the side of the church. I'm going to put some video of that up on my locals page, and I'm going to do a CBN story about that today. So, the tensions are certainly continuing to rise in the north. The IDF has struck some very large ammunition dumps north of the border inside Lebanon in recent days. And because of that, Hezbollah is getting more and more stirred up. I've read 2 different actually takes on that. I've read some intel that says that Hezbollah is actually pulling some of its troops back across the north of the Litani River because they're getting their heads handed to them south of there. And then I've heard that Israel is killing lots of them and blowing up a lot of Hezbollah infrastructure in that region south of the Litani. I guess both of those could be true because they're striking infrastructure more than they are troops, but they're still killing people up there. More than 100 Hezbollah troops that have been killed so far up there. How old is the church? I tried to figure that out. It doesn't say exactly when this particular church building was built, but there has been a church there for like hundreds and hundreds of years. Actually, the Canaanites had a place of worship on that hilltop, apparently, before it was a church. So it's been a place of worship for millennia. There are ancient wine presses and things like that they found all around there. So it's been inhabited for millennia. This is on the kind of main trade route that went north-south up from Israel up into Lebanon. And so it was a more important trading place before. Now it's kind of a little out of the way. But the IDF, as I mentioned, has been pushing to, start more offensive action against the Hezbollah troops in Lebanon. And they haven't yet gone on the ground into Lebanon, but it looks like they may be preparing to do so, because I saw one report that said that Israel was moving more tanks north. Thank you, Priscilla. Was moving more tanks north into that border region. And it looked like preparing to maybe cross the border into Lebanon. However, word is that the United States has forbade them from doing so. So the U.S. has contacted Israel and said, you may not enter Lebanon. And this has got to be absolutely frustrating, to say the least, for Israeli troops. And the Israeli citizens who have been kicked out of that area, that have been evacuated. A lot of, they say that there have been 60,000 people that have been evacuated from the northern border region. But a lot more than that have actually left. More than 80,000 have left. The difference is that some people, Israel said, we're going to pay to evacuate people that are within 5 kilometers of the border. But there are people who are maybe 6 kilometers from the border who are still getting rocketed and shelled and missiles and stuff fired at them. And they're like, we can't live like this. And so they're evacuating. I got something in my eye. They're evacuating on their own voluntarily. So they don't get paid to leave. They don't get the government assistance that they need to stay in a hotel or something like that. So it's costing them, those people, money. And all of those people that have left are tired of being gone and they want to move back to their homes. So they've been pressuring the government to do whatever's necessary to make it safe for them to get back into their homes in the northern border. But with the United States telling Israel, you cannot do what's necessary to make it safe for those people. Now what those people have done is they wrote an open letter to, oh, thank you very much. Is that Dora? Doxy. Thank you, Doxy. They wrote an open letter to the United States government and Joe Biden saying, butt out, mister. Leave us alone. Let the IDF do what they have to do to let us go back to our homes. We don't want to stay gone from the border region for the rest of our lives. And our lives have been upended now for months, and we're tired of it. So we want to go back home. So what you can see there is this pressure from both sides that the Israeli government is getting. They're being squeezed by the U.S. government. Don't do anything. Stop fighting. Leave Hamas alone. And they've been squeezed by their people saying, we are not going back home. It's going to keep costing you money until you make that safe for us. I would say that whether or not Israel goes into the northern border, it goes across into Lebanon, is going to show us a measure of how much control the United States really has over Israel. So do I hope they go into Lebanon? Yes, I do. Because I want them to, I would like to see Israel stand up to the United States and say, we like getting the support we get from you, but we're going to do what we have to do regardless. I would like to see Israel do that. And so would a lot of Israeli citizens. They'd like to see that as well. Whether or not we see that will tell us what we need to know about the strength of this particular government and whether or not it's likely that they will get reelected, because I suppose there will be a lot of fallout from this whole thing once this is all over. There's a new peace deal that is being put on the table by Egypt. They've come up with a new peace plan that they're pushing to try to come up with a permanent ceasefire, an end of the hostilities in Gaza and in the north. And right from the outset, it's a non-starter for Israel because it presents a path for Hamas to not only survive, but continue to govern in Gaza. So that right there says it's not going to happen. But before Israel could even, reject it, Hamas and the PIJ in Gaza rejected it and said, nothing doing. We're not going to go for that. So even though down in the south, in Gaza, Hamas is really getting murdered left and right, the Israeli army has been doing a great job in the northern part of Gaza. They have almost full operational control now in the northern part of Gaza, and they are pushing deeper into Khan Yunis and even moving further south of that. They're also moving south from northern Gaza toward Khan Yunis. So they've come in from the side. I may have let's see if I have a map of this. You can see that line in central Gaza, which is sort of the boundary between North and South Gaza. And north of there, this is an old map, but they've expanded that pocket of area in the north that was not under their control. They have expanded into that area, so that pocket is much, much smaller now. But they've also moved south of that line, that central line, toward Deir al-Balah. And you can see the kind of green area in the south where they had gone in and created a pocket in Khan Yunis. That has also expanded, and they're pushing further south toward the Rafah gate. So Israel is doing well. They're fighting very hard. I mean, that you can tell by the number of casualties that they're taking. They're up to 167, I think, deaths now since the invasion started. They have also recovered the bodies of, it's got to be up to about a dozen hostages now that are all dead, they were murdered. So the number of hostages that is still being held in Gaza is something like, thank you, Nancy, is something like 128 maybe. And the Israelis are still hoping to recover those hostages. They are certainly open to talking if there's some plan that can be put on the table that will include the release of all those hostages. But Hamas is taking a tough line now and saying, we're not going to release any more hostages until you stop fighting for good. And so the IDF is saying, okay, then we're going to just go take this to the mat and we're going to end it and get our hostages back or not. To their credit, the IDF is being pretty, what's the word? Cynical, I guess, about whether or not they're going to actually get any hostages back alive. They realize that the goal of this operation is, if you had to rank the goals, one of them is obviously to get the hostages back. But if you had to rank the goals, above getting the hostages back has to be completing this operation in such a way that Hamas will not be a threat to Israel anymore, that they won't have any more October 7ths ever again. To that end, they have to continue to push whether or not they get the hostages back. Now, word came out, I saw yesterday, that the IDF has actually started to construct a 1 kilometer no man's land in northern Gaza between the Israeli border and what will be the rest of Gaza City and Bet Hanun and the northern part of Gaza. They are going to apparently continue to maintain a 1 kilometer no man's land where nobody can enter. They said it was a mistake. In the past, what we did is we had this nice big fence, but we allowed the Hamas, or we allowed Palestinians to come right up to the fence and throw rocks at us and shoot at us and throw Molotov cocktails and, you know, beat on the fence and all that. And we didn't do much about it as long as they didn't try to cross the fence. But now we're going to maintain a 1 kilometer zone where nobody can enter. And that to me sounds like a pretty good idea. 1 kilometer is going to be very difficult for them to breach. If they tried to breach it again, there's more time for the Israelis to respond to that breach. It's going to be more difficult for them to dig tunnels 1 kilometer under, all the way under there into Israel. So I think that's what you're going to see. I think that is what they're going to come up with as far as an end state here, is that they will put a no man's land of 1 kilometer all the way around Gaza and say, okay, you just lost that land. You don't get that land. Sorry. Maybe try not attacking us and you wouldn't have that problem. Do you have a Give, Send, Go account? Yes, I do. Maybe I can get Connie to post the Give, Send, Go account. I don't know if she actually has that link. I can maybe post it here while I'm talking. So I got to sign in here to get Give, Send, Go, get the link for you. There is a Give, Send, Go link to help the wants me to update, of course. It's probably not gonna. Don't you love, when they want you to redo your password? It's got to be 17 characters long. It's got to be, it's got to be something that you can't remember, but don't write it down. And it has to be, have a haiku in it and some Gaelic runes and things like that. Like that's awesome. Oh, there we go. Okay. It's such a pain having to try to do passwords all the time. Okay, so here's the link. Nope, that's not it. Here's the link to it's called the Cartagena Project, and I will post it down here in the chat right now. All right, so if you'd like to give specifically to those families in Cartagena, Colombia, that we are helping try to keep them out of prostitution and help them find a better way without coming to the United States, that's one place where you can give if you want to give down there. Okay, so this peace deal that Egypt put on the table is a non-starter. It's not going to happen. Israel is doing well. They're fighting hard. Hamas is not giving up. But I want you to consider, and I want you to go look at my locals page and look at the videos I'm putting up that are filmed by Hamas. Hamas puts up these videos every day of them attacking the IDF. And they have like a GoPro camera and a guy running in it. It looks like a first-person shooter game. And he's running up with a RPG or something, sticking his head out of a window and firing at a tank that's speeding by. And then they show this explosion as if, they claim that as a kill. The thing is, these tanks were made to survive an RPG. The armor on those tanks is very, very thick. It's one of the heaviest tanks in the world, those Merkava tanks. And they have this trophy countermeasure system that fires essentially tiny little rockets at a rocket that's shot at the tank. So there's a little radar dish on each side of the tank, and it can pick up when somebody fires an RPG at them, and it fires a bunch of missiles back, almost like a shotgun, that catches that RPG in midair and makes it explode. So it makes a big explosion, but it doesn't allow those RPGs to actually penetrate the tank. Somebody says the IDF is running out of ammunition. Not so much. The IDF has enough ammunition to continue this fight for quite some time. If the United States stops supplying ammunition and stuff to the IDF, they can still get it from elsewhere. There are plenty of places they can go to get the ammunition that they need, and they will do what they have to do. So that's not a huge problem for them. It may become a problem at some point in the future, but it's not right now. So I just want to point out, and I've done that on my page. If you go to chuckholton.com, I put these videos up that show Hamas shooting a tank, and then it cuts off right as soon as the tank gets hit. They don't show the aftermath of like a burning tank. And the reason for that is because the tank is not being knocked out. It looks bad, but it's not actually that bad. Now, the IDF has lost some tanks and some equipment. You would expect that to happen in a war of this size. But all things considered, the IDF says that they have recovered 30,000 explosive devices that they've captured from Hamas and destroyed. They've recovered tens of thousands of weapons. They've recovered hundreds and probably over 1,000 rockets. And so they are taking a lot of military hardware off the battlefield for Hamas. They've also killed something like 2,000 Hamas fighters. Now, these are guys who are specifically engaged in combat against the IDF that they count as, kills. There are probably a lot more Hamas fighters who have been killed in the tunnels that they're blowing up or entombed down there. They are clearing those tunnels and then blowing up the tunnels as they clear them. I've seen several methods that they use to clear them. They're using these dogs, very dangerous for the dogs, and I feel terrible for those poor dogs because they're losing a lot of the military working dogs in those tunnels. Dozens of those dogs have been killed. But it's better than losing a soldier. And so they send dogs down there and they run around down there and clear the tunnels. I've seen drones, actually flying drones that they put into the tunnels and they fly around inside the tunnels. And then there are like these little tiny tanks that it's like a drone tank that's about this big that they drive into the tunnels and drive around in there with a camera on it. So there are lots of methods that they're using to clear them. Once they clear them, they close them for good. They blow them up or seal them up somehow. And they're just realizing this is going to take a lot longer than they thought because the IDF is finding so many thousands of tunnels all over Gaza. The true extent of the tunnel network is mind-boggling, absolutely mind-boggling. Okay, I'm still working on an embed, and I told them I'll come back. As soon as you tell me that I can come embed with IDF troops, I'm there. Until then, there's not a lot of reason for me to go back because I can do everything I was doing from Jerusalem, from right here in my office in West Virginia or my office in Panama. So I don't need to go back to Israel if they're not going to let me into Gaza. So I'm continuing to press them and on letting me in. And when I get word that they will allow me into Gaza, then I will go back. In the meantime, there's a lot of reporting I can do from elsewhere. I'll probably take a day and go down to the Darien Gap and bring you some information about the migrant crisis, the tens of thousands of people coming through every week on their way to the United States. That's a big story, and I have an even bigger story I can't quite tell you all the details of that relates to that coming up in mid-January. So you're going to be amazed at that for sure. There's Guyana and the coming conflict or maybe conflict between Venezuela and Guyana. So I'm going to try to go there. I'd like to go to the UK and actually go visit with Hatun and talk about the outright persecution that Christians are facing in the UK right now. The UK is all but lost, I would say, as a free country. It's not a free country. The UK is not a free country. If you're living in the UK, you know what I'm talking about. You are not free. You're not free to speak your mind. You're not free to go where you like. You're not free to take a stand for Israel if you want to, without repercussions from many people who live there, danger to your body and your property. So I want to go and do some reporting on that, but there's a lot more. I mean, there's Eritrea and Ethiopia are about to go to war. So I could be reporting on that. Ukraine is actually coming down to the wire. And I feel like I need to go and kind of do an update on Ukraine. So, it's going to be a busy year. Let's put it that way. While I'm at it, I wanted to also mention two things as far as events, opportunities for you that you might be interested in. Number one is, again, we have this trip to Israel that we're going to plan for the first week of October of next year because we want to be in Israel over the 1-year anniversary of the attack to stand with the Israeli people. And we're going to invite you to come along. We have not opened up that trip yet. We have a bunch of people interested. We could probably have 100 people on the trip. We're also going to go into Jordan, and we're going to go see Petra and some of the places that you just have to see. So just keep an eye open for that. We're going to open it up after the first of the year and start taking actual deposits on that trip. We had 2 people cancel on our May trip to Armenia. So I think we'll have to go back and see how many people we have on the waiting list. I know we have a bunch that wanted to go to Armenia. And look, if you are signed up for one of our trips and you need to cancel, can I just ask a favor? Just tell me. Just send me an email and say, hey, we have to drop out. We can't make it. What we've seen people do is actually go and initiate a chargeback on their credit card for the deposit. And you don't have to do that. We'll give you your money back. We'll refund your money. We don't care. But when you initiate a chargeback on your credit card, it puts a ding on us by the credit agency. So please don't do that. Just get a hold of us and we'll give your money back. But my son is also going to run a couple of tours himself, backpacking tours around Armenia this coming year in the summer. They're going to be really cool. My son's an avid outdoorsman, backpacker. I'm going to try to go along. We're going to try to make the backpacking trip contiguous with the actual tours that we're running over there, so that if you wanted to, you could do both. Because we have some people who have already said they wanted to do both. But there is a lot of unspoiled land up in the mountains in Armenia that rivals anything that you would see in the Swiss Alps. It is absolutely heavenly, gorgeous up there. And we're going to do some off-trail backpacking, so off the beaten path, bushwhacking, trekking across areas where who knows what you'll find out there. There's ancient history littered all over Armenia that has never been cataloged. And we've found old villages, old churches, the ruins of monasteries. We found tombs that actually have human remains in them. And so we're going to go and have an amazing time on these backpacking trips in Armenia. I don't know if I can make all of them, but I'm going to try to make at least one of them. And if you'd like to join us to go backpacking in Armenia, we will be opening that up after the first of the year as well. So keep that in mind. You will need a passport. It takes about 6 weeks to get a passport if you don't have one. So if you are planning to go on any of these trips, you better get your passport application in and expedite it right now. You got to do that. So what was the other? Yeah, so those are 2 things: trip to Armenia, backpacking, and the trip to Israel. There may be some other trips coming up that I will announce as we go along. One thing that I did get nailed down is that the second weekend of May, I believe, my friend Tim Miller, who has been on the podcast with me, he's got his own show called the Real Security Podcast, or Lionheart Security Consulting, or something like that now on YouTube. You just go to Real Security Podcast with Tim Miller. You can look that up. I highly recommend you subscribe to that. Tim Miller is a former Secret Service agent, a former Marine colonel, 24 years in the Marine Corps, 16 years as a cop, and a federal agent, and is one of the most highly trained human beings on this planet, I believe. And Tim is going to do a self-protection shooting weekend along with a guy named Mike Pellegrini, who is a former Delta Force operative that is literally one of the best pistol shots on the planet, in the world, and has been the lead trainer at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, FLETC, for many years. This is some of the best firearms training that you can get anywhere, point, period, end of story. And they will be here at the lodge doing a small, intimate training, firearms training, the weekend of the 11th and 12th, I think, of May. And we will be opening up signups for that very shortly as well. So if you want to get some of the best training you can possibly get, not just to become a better shooter, because their training is not about getting better at shooting on the range. It's about surviving a violent encounter if you ever find yourself in that situation, getting from the range to the street. And I've been through their training many times, and I can tell you it is the best firearms training you will get anywhere. And it's more than just learning to shoot better. It's getting educated about the law and what you can and cannot do to protect yourself, how to stay out of jail if you do have to use violence in an encounter, what to do in a case of a mass shooting, all kinds of stuff that you learn from them, as well as some first aids things. And they bring one of those Milo range training systems and set it up so that you actually can run through scenario after scenario and get better and better at de-escalation and your draw time and your targeting and all kinds of stuff. Very, very good training. Highly recommend it, and we'll be opening that up soon. Okay, let's answer some questions. Is there any info you can share about all the female tank crews? I have read some articles about it. I'm sure you've read the same articles. I can't add anything to what's out there. There are some all-female tank crews that are, doing a great job out there. P. Corn says, N-acetylcysteine is super amino acids. Please check it out. These are my favorite comments on here. We're talking about Israel, and we're talking about war and disaster, and somebody comes on and says, you got to check out N-acetylcysteine. Believe it or not, P. Corns, I actually take NAC every day and have for quite some time. So I agree with you. N-acetylcysteine is a great thing to take for longevity. And now we're talking about turmeric. How do we get, I missed all this. That's why I don't wear my glasses when I'm talking, because I'd get really distracted by all of this. Where do you get your turmeric? I don't get turmeric. I don't take turmeric. Yeah, there we go. Lionheart Protection Strategies. Thank you, Ronnie and Jeff. You guys are awesome. You need to come visit us sometime. Yes, Hatun Tosh is safe. I announced that at the beginning. And we're going to try to get her back on if she'll come on and talk to us. She's still, I guess, in hiding. What's the status of things in the West Bank? Whew, Steve, that is a complex question. The IDF has been doing missions every day in the West Bank and Judea and Samaria. They have been taking out Hamas leaders that are hiding there, taking out Hamas operatives, and headquarters, places where they're storing weapons. They've uncovered thousands of weapons and explosives and all sorts of things in places like Jenin and Ramallah and Nablus. So that's, ongoing. It's still a big risk. I just heard from the guys at HaYovel, that Christian group that is raising money to try to help the settlers in Judea and Samaria be safer. And they have been able to raise like $2.5 million now to buy body armor and drones and night vision and things like that, so that these settlements throughout Judea and Samaria can guard themselves from attacks by the Arabs that live around them. And that's great. They're trying to raise 21 million. So they need a lot more. If you want to support them, you can go to serveisrael.com, serveisrael.com, and donate over there. And I recommend that you do that. So why does the media idolize Sinwar? I don't know. That's a good question. Maronites would, Laura, she says Maronites are actually Catholic. They're closer to Catholic than you are probably, but the Maronites that I've spoken to would take issue with you calling them Catholic. They're more like Orthodox, which is on the spectrum for sure. But they would not consider themselves Catholic. Not the ones I've spoken to. You do not believe there are prophets and lady pastors? I'm not sure where that came from. I was talking about a pastora that we met, that we're friends with in Cartagena. And I don't believe it is. I don't believe that we should have to have women pastors. But there are women pastors, and unfortunately, we do have to have them, and that's just because there are not enough men who are stepping up and fulfilling that role. So this lady pastor that we know um, in Cartagena, there was no church in her neighborhood. There were no men who would start one, so she started one, and she's doing a great job running it. And it would be great if some men would step up and take leadership, like the Bible says in that, but they're not right now. So she's doing it herself. Someone that doesn't watch the news, I love all your reviews and coverage. Thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Commento. Let's see. Where do we go here? I'm looking for other questions. Do you think the Palestinians get something of the humanitarian aid, or is everything confiscated by Hamas? I just saw that there were some Palestinians who were trying to rob the aid trucks. So here's what happens. The aid gets sent in there like to the World Food Program. And the World Food Program has big warehouses inside Gaza where they've been stockpiling aid for years. And they have a ton of aid, right? And these warehouses were packed with aid. And they would dole it out little at a time. It got to the point where the people got desperate enough, they actually raided these warehouses and cleaned them out. This is long after the World Food Program was saying, there's no more food in Gaza, the people are starving. At the same time, they had warehouses full of aid in Gaza that they weren't giving out to the people. But the people went and robbed it, took it all. Now, the aid trucks that are coming in, they would go to those distribution points, but they're getting picked off before they even get to those distribution points by hungry people who just jump on the trucks and start ripping aid off. And Hamas is going in shooting those people and taking the aid for themselves. They killed the wrong person, though, because there's a family in Rafah, the furthest south in Gaza, that's a very, very powerful family, like, think Bedouin sheikhs, okay, something like that. Very powerful, almost like royalty down there. They were the big potatoes in Rafah. And one of the guys that got killed robbing one of these aid trucks by Hamas was one of their sons. And so now those guys are starting to fight against Hamas in the south, and they're burning tires and protesting and causing all kinds of trouble. So we are seeing a lot of division happening in southern Gaza between that family, which is a very powerful family, and what's left of Hamas down there. But Hamas still has thousands of fighters. This is not going to be over anytime soon. They are still organized, and they are fighting against Israel, and Israel is killing them wherever they find them. But it is going to be a long process, months. If I don't go back to Israel in January, it's still going to be there in February. It's still going to be there in March, and that war is still going to be going on. So I'm just going to keep hitting those guys and trying to get the IDF to let me in. And as soon as they do, then I will go back. How can you rebuild a country riddled with tunnels? Well, it's not going to be riddled with tunnels when they're done with it, Deborah, because they're blowing them up. So it might be a country that's maybe 20 feet lower than it was when they started. But if you watch the videos, I'll put some of them up on my website over at chuckholton.com. You can go and look at the video coming out of Gaza, and it's not livable. When the IDF gets done with Gaza, it will not be livable, and they're going to have to rebuild it from scratch, because the IDF's policy is we will destroy anything that is militarized by Hamas. Anything that's being used in a military capacity by Hamas is going to get pancaked. Unfortunately for the people of Gaza, virtually every building in Gaza is being militarized by Hamas. So whether they shoot at you from that building, pancake the building. If they fire rockets from the building, pancake the building. If they like, if they find weapons or booby traps in the building, pancake the building. If there's a tunnel entrance under the building, pancake the building. So you can imagine most of the buildings are going to get bulldozed before they're done. And so it's going to be very difficult for Hamas or for the Palestinians to come back and just move back in and, just keep on going. They're going to have to rebuild it, and most likely U.S. taxpayers are going to foot the bill for that. Mark my words. So Priscilla says, why aren't they letting you go in? I don't know, Priscilla. It would be in their best interest to let me come in. They say, oh, well, it's not safe. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I know when to duck. And it's not a valid excuse for you to say, we're not going to let you in because it's not safe. And therefore, the word is not getting out, except by the word that's being put out by one of the two belligerents. It hurts the IDF's cause not to let more journalists in, and they don't understand that. Hatun Tosh has been found. She's okay, and I guess she's still in hiding, but we're supposed to find out more today about her. Any word on the survivors from October 7th? Yeah, some of them are coming out and, pressuring the government to stop the fighting so they can get more hostages out, even though Hamas themselves have said, we won't release any more hostages until the fighting ends for good. So there's that. It's like the Israeli government can't win no matter what it does at this point. If they stop the fighting, half the country or more is going to be mad at them. If they continue fighting, half the country is going to be mad at them. They're going to be, in trouble either way. What's the status of the tunnels being flooded? I guess they're still doing that in some capacity. Eric Prince just put a new podcast up on his podcast. It's called Off Leash with Eric Prince, talking about the tunnels and the flooding of the tunnels. He was heavily involved with that process. And so you can go watch that and probably learn more. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet, but I plan to watch it today. The status of Sinwar, Yahya Sinwar is his name. They have not killed him or found him yet, as far as I know. Let's see. Iran has good fighter jets and great pilots. Yes. Iran has lots of fighter jets, RB, and they have some of the best pilots. I've been reading a very interesting book about military exploits of the IDF recently, and some of the things that they have done in the past give me great confidence that they will win in this conflict. They will win eventually, but they're going to have to continue fighting for a long time. It's going to take months. The ones that kidnapped Noah Armani appeared to be civilians. Yes. They were offered $10,000 and an apartment for every Jew they brought back. And that's why there were like 1,500 Hamas fighters that went in on October 7th to Israel, but there were like 3,500 people at a minimum who crossed from Gaza into Israel, because there were a lot of civilians that crossed over as well and looted and raped and murdered and stuff. Some of them, as more and more details come out about what happened on October 7th, it just gets harder and harder to see. There was a neat article that I posted on my website today about it was written by a Muslim doctor in Israel who is working, in Israeli hospitals, and responded on October 7th and was, one of the first frontline doctors to treat the wounded and to see the dead that were coming in. And so this is a Muslim Arab doctor in Israel who is among the only Arabs who is actually condemning what happened October 7th. And she's saying, it is shameful what the Queen of Jordan is saying about, she's saying, well, we don't really think We think they're exaggerating. There wasn't that many killed. They weren't beheading babies. They weren't burning bodies. All that. And this Arab Muslim doctor in Israel is saying, I saw the beheaded babies. I saw the burned bodies. And I'm telling you, it happened. And it is shameful that the Queen of Jordan would spread lies like this. So, yeah, Scott Ritter, if you're listening to Scott Ritter, please stop. This guy is such a clown. Look, he's been wrong on everything he has said since the beginning of the war in Ukraine. Like, go back and look at anything that he said about Ukraine. He's been wrong, like consistently. He's just wrong about everything. He's one of those guys that tickles people's ears. There's people out there that want to hear that Israel is losing, and he is out there tickling the ears of those people. What do you think about the Dark Horizon books? I don't think I've read the Dark Horizon books. I'll have to go look those up, see if I have. That's right. I'll report from Gaza in God's time. And I'm not worried about it because there's plenty of work for me to do all over the world. And, folks, if I had to, just being as frank as I can possibly be, the bigger story that Americans need to be worried about, and really Westerners all over the world, is illegal migration. It is a bigger existential threat to America than anything that's happening in Ukraine or in Israel. And Israel's important. Ukraine is important. There are lots of people hurting, lots of places around the world. And my calling is to go and report their stories. But the illegal migration into the United States is at such a level like we've never seen before that it's a bigger story. And I need to do more reporting on that this coming year. So I'm going to do that for sure. Okay, that's about all I've got for today. And I need to go because I've got to prepare for, I'm going to be interviewing, let's see, 2 o'clock. So about 2.5 hours from now, I'm going to be doing a live on CBN's YouTube with Eric Stakelbeck from TBN. Eric and I worked together for many years at CBN, and then he got this show over at TBN and moved over there. And he's been following all things Israel for years now because his show is called The Watchman, and it talks about Israel. And so, it is definitely one that you're not going to want to miss. So set your alarm. At 2 o'clock Eastern time today, I'm going to be doing this live interview with Eric Stakelbeck. And so, please come and watch that. Somebody said, is the IDF winding down in Gaza? IDF soldiers are being sent home. No, Henny, they're not winding down in Gaza at all. If anything, they're continuing to ramp up the fight, but they are rotating people out so that they can go home and get some rest, because these people have been fighting since mid-October. And here we are, Christmas already. So they are giving guys a couple days of leave to go back, and they're rotating people out. But they are ramping up the fighting in Gaza. It's not tapering off in any way. 160 something, 67, I think, soldiers killed since the beginning of the invasion. Okay, well, thank you for watching. God bless you. Let's say a quick prayer. Lord Jesus, we just pray for the peace of Israel. We ask that you would be with those soldiers, that when they go home to spend some time with their families, they would be able to set aside everything they've been through in Gaza and heal very quickly just from the love and the embrace of their family. We know that some of them already have been home and have had that time with their family and then gone back to the fight and have been killed. So we pray for those families, Lord, who got to hold their soldier for one last time before he was killed in the fight. Lord, there's so much heartbreak that we see in the news all over the world, in Israel, in Ukraine, in Africa, in the United States, all over. And we just pray for everyone who's hurting. that you would be their God, that when everything else is gone, when people have lost everything, that you would be there for them and be all the more clear to them, and that they would cry out to you and find you in that moment, and that you would use that time of heartache for them to bring them into your kingdom, Lord. We pray in Jesus' name, amen. Okay, God bless you, folks. We'll see you again tomorrow. Take care.